Hello guys. Hello. Hello. Am I audible? Hello. Hello guys. My name is Adil. So I welcome you here. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. So first I would like to give the introduction of our platform. Then I will tell you how the webinar will be conducted, and then we will uh, and then a speaker will come and he will start his presentation. So this is the world literature webinars. We arrange international webinars conducted by most experienced and knowledgeable speakers. They will come and they share knowledge about their topics, and the topics will be regarding literature. So now I would like to talk about the this webinar, that how this webinar will be conducted. So this webinar is comprises three parts. In the first part, we will conduct the webinar, and the topic of the webinar is neuroaesthetics as a platform for meaning making and literary discourse. In the second part, we will have a question and answer session where you will ask the questions from the speaker regarding topic. In the last part, I will share the link of the feedback form which you have to fill in order to get the certificate. So therefore, watch till the end to earn your certificate. So now I would like to welcome our today's speaker. Hello, sir.
Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon here from Nigeria. Good evening, depending on where you are right now.
Thank you,
My
sir.
name is Moses. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
All right, thank you. My name is Moses Aule, the speaker of today's webinar. I am from Nigeria. I I teach at the Department of English, Kaduna State College of Education, Kaduna State, uh, Nigeria. Um, okay, I have worked in several places before coming to the Kaduna State College of Education. I taught part-time in the Kaduna State University
Sir, I
for a period
think
of 4 years.
you have a network problem.
Sorry, network? It, is my network cracking? Can you hear me now?
Hello, sir.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Oh, are we together now? Can you hear me? Give me a minute, please. Am I back? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Am I audible? Am I audible? Can you hear me now, please? Mm. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Am I back now?
Yes, sir. Now it's fine.
It's fine now.
Yes, sir.
Oh, so sorry. It's
It's
the
okay, sir.
way
It's okay. It's okay, sir.
it's the way things are here.
Yes, sir.
Um, all right. Am I audible now, please?
Yes, sir. You are
All
completely
right.
audible.
It's okay then. I was trying to introduce myself, as
Yes,
you
sir.
said I should do. My name is Moses Aule. I am teacher educator from the Kaduna State College of Education, Gidan, WAYA, Nigeria. I I have worked variously across different levels of education. I taught with the secondary school. Here we call it secondary school. So some would call it high school. I taught a period of 12 years, and within the period, I taught as a part-time lecturer with the Kaduna State University, a period of 4 years before securing the much more permanent appointment here with the Kaduna State University. I have I I got my first degree with the Kaduna State University, then my master's with the Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, where I researched on Caribbean literature, specifically focusing my attention on women, Caribbean women, the subjective voices of women in the Caribbean. And the work has been published into book. It's online. If you go to Amazon and the rest is there. And then I am currently pursuing a PhD with the Ahmadu Bello University. And part of what I'm doing here is an aspect of my research work. And when Adil approached me to present in this webinar, I felt I should be able to present something I'm doing, I'm working on, so that I can have more input from various voices, particularly given that this is a world literature webinar, the focus is on literature. I said, okay, it is wise for me to bring this so I can put my idea and then get views that will upgrade the work. It's part of the PhD work I am pursuing. So at the end of the webinar, the second part of it, I would appreciate if I get comments, very nice comments that would be critical enough to improve the standard of the work. I have published in various journals. I have 12 publications in journals, one of which is international publication. Then I have attended 8 different conferences, one of which is also at the international stage. So that is it about me. And then I would go into our topic. Before I go on, I would like to thank uh, the host of this webinar, Adil. I have followed series of webinars organized by this uh, platform, and I have learned a lot. The previous one that talks about T.S. Eliot, I learned interpersonal, theory, uh, deploying T.S. Eliot. I learned a lot. And when I was approached, I was like, the person that presented the last time was a professor, I think associate professor. And then I wish I could measure up. But one thing I learned about Mr. Adil is his consistency, is his purposefulness, is his desire to see knowledge dissemination, cross-breeding of ideas across nations, across the people. And this, I feel, is a very viable platform upon which we can advance literary discourses. So the topic I'm presenting, as he said, on is neuroaesthetics as platform for meaning making in literary discourse. Now, this presentation is going to be in two parts. This I'm doing today, I feel, should be the first presentation. And if I am privileged to have another opportunity in a month or two, I would be glad to come up stage to present the second part of the research, which would be more of the analysis. In this first one, I am going to set the platform upon which the philosophy that ran through the thesis is anchored upon. Adil, you can move to the next slide. The next slide.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're beginning with introduction. This presentation, like I said, contributes to the ongoing efforts to examine the viability of literature within the burgeoning field of neuroaesthetics. As a platform, essentially what spurred my interest in this topic, neuroaesthetics, is when I stumbled upon international discourse that was trying to shape an idea on the viability of neurosciences to other forms of discourses. So a number of scholars were invited, and then from different fields, from art history, from medicine, from philosophy, from psychology, from across board. And then nobody was called upon to represent literature within that platform. And the idea they were trying to pursue, they said, is what they call interdisciplinarity. They said, arguing that the human person, the human agent cannot be understood through sciences, through just one lens of discourse. So they felt that bringing people from various fields together can aggregate ideas on which the human mind can be explored. So my concern essentially began when I discovered that no representation from literature in the platform. And I was like, is it that literature does not have the platform, the tools upon which these discourses can be advanced, can be engaged? And that spurred my research. So I went into reading, and I discovered that a few research have been done using music, using art, and no literary text was explored until recently when Joseph Caro, Professor Joseph Caro began to advance that literature is also a viable means of engaging in this interdisciplinary discourse. He argued in a number of places. And then this also, like I said, is a contribution to this effort to show that literature is also a viable tool upon which the field of neurosciences can be engaged. Now, the point. As a new form of literary investigation, neuroaesthetics explore the brain as a controlling agency in the process of meaning making. We are concerned here. Sorry, I think there's an error there. We're concerned here with deploying neuroaesthetics as a means of unnoting ways in which the private experiences of the subjective agent can activate their aesthetic impulse. Now, by subjective agent, I am referring to the author or the creator or the scriptor, and also the reader in the context of literature, or the spectator. Now, this subjective agency, I said, how their aesthetic impulses can be activated. We want to find out what goes on in the process of interpretation of text, even in the process of encoding meaning by the author. So we ontological discourses on on literature beginning especially from Plato to the post-structuralist period show that the text offers multiple paradigms for meaning making. Now, we are aware that the text has been the consign of so many scholars, beginning with Plato. So we want to see how this platform, for example, the text offers multiple paradigms. So the different tools have been used. Different literary tools have been used to explore the text. Different theories, as in some climes, they insist that your reading a literary work must be deployed through a tool of analysis. So different ones have been done. So we want to see also how neuroaesthetics can be deployed in this process of unveiling the text within the frame of evolutionary model of interpretation, which this adopts. Caro's work, reconceptualizes Abraham's four categories of literary meta universals using biological terms. M.A. Abraham conceptualized the controlling agencies in literary discourses. He spoke about the universe, he spoke about the work, he spoke about the artist, and he spoke about the audience. And he brought this four grids. They call them grids, they call them coordinates of art criticism, to borrow from him. As he argues, they are inscribed in almost all theories which aim to be comprehensive. In this theorization, the work which is in the center of his theory is considered as the artistic product itself. The second, the artist, is the artificer, a human product, that is the writer. The third, which he calls the universe, is frequently denoted by the word of all work, nature, which an artist is said to imitate. So, but Caro moved this discussion forward by deploying biological concepts so as to conceptualize and argue that evolutionary theory, for example, the literary Darwinism, can also be used in analyzing literary text. The next, move to the next. Thank you. So, Carroll's position cleared the ground for this very thesis in a number of ways. First, it demonstrates that in fiction, human organism provides the template for creating characters, dramatic personnel, or a persona for which the reader is equally implicated. The textual environment creates what is called setting, the replica of sociobiological and natural space, familiar to both the author and the reader. Plots, in this sense, are driven by what these organisms do and what happens to them during a segment of time. The communication organisms make to other organisms in the text require the medium of sight, sound, smell, or some other bit of the environment, all of which instigates the reader's brain or emotional praxis in the process of interpretation. It is clear, therefore, that the textual world, that is, the environment, is imbued with depictions that foreground the author's point of view, or what Caro refers to as quality of mind, perspective, interpretation, where literary meaning occurs. On the one hand, and on the other, draws the readers to share in the imagined world captured in the text. So what we are consigned here is to see how the author and the reader are engaged in the interpretation of text. How does the reader get into the text? I'll step back a bit to say also that one of the things that inspired this research is all through my years of teaching, I've encountered students who come to me and ask, how do I understand? How do I interpret a literary text? So they find it difficult to pin down meaning. How do we come about meaning? Uh, so this engagement, how does the reader and the author, is there any meeting point between them that spark what they call the aesthetics? So this is why the overriding polemics of phenomenological theoreticians like the fallopian tube hang on the text as an entity of meaning and the supremacy of the subjective agents, that is the author and the reader, as meaning uh, makers in literary discourse. So those two come together in the process of bringing in meaning. The author comes in, deploys the text as a way of, of, of speaking to the public. He has a meaning. He encodes it in the text. So, but the reader comes into the same text to unveil this meaning. Now, different theories have argued that, for example, Roland Barthes argued for the death of the author, that you do not need the author to unveil meaning of a text. But how does the reader now get into the text? What are the platform, the meeting point between the reader and the author that can help in sparking up this aesthetic impulse? So the above position suggests that the text has two poles, namely the artistic and the aesthetics. So the author comes into the text, with the artistic creation to create this space called a text, and then the reader comes to unveil the meaning, called the aesthetics, and according to Isaiah. In effect, the aesthetic vision, as this thesis would use, we use, there are primary texts that the text is working on. There are three, they're all poetic texts. So they work, would use this text, to to elucidate, to enhance, to show that a society, in the text lies what the society, the culture, the worldview, and the religion permits us to see. So meaning is drawn from the text to the extent that your culture allows you. So the vision you get the text with, your mind interprets not far away from what your culture permits you to see, what your society permits you to see, the worldview that you grew within, the religion, and other variables come into play in the interpretation of text. So the aesthetics now is drawn or appreciated by some of these variables. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now the problematic. What brings about when we talk about the problematic? We're talking about the conceptual gap. We're talking about what actually sparked the discourse. Of course, I've mentioned a number of them. I said this work attempts to offer perspective that could illustrate ways in which literature may be aggregated into and explored through approaches of neuroaesthetics. That is one of the visions of this research, to also show that no, literature is also a viable means of engaging in aesthetic discourses. So we are concerned particularly by the scant attention most seminal works on neuroaesthetics, such as Zeki's work, Davies, Bork, and Caro, among others, give to literary works, and especially the poetic genre, in their effort to designate neuroaesthetics as an emerging field of transdisciplinary engagement. When these epistemic and conceptual gaps as well as the selected poetic texts are explored, we may demonstrate that literature fit into the interdisciplinarity of neuroaesthetics as a means of exploring the human mind as the foundation of human culture, mediated through a neurological and hormonal system that regulate perception, feelings, and thought. The next slide. The next slide. The basic objective of the work. Now, I'll step back a bit to also say that the the work, this very research, is sparked by um, two major literary theories. One is literary Darwinism, and the other is reader response. Now, the work, this research deploys these two theoretical platforms to see how literature can also, engage in neuroaesthetic discourses. So literary Darwinism has been brought in, and then, of course, reader response has been brought in to aggregate meaning. All right. So the objective now. The next slide, please. The objective. Are you there? So the thesis is aimed at contributing to the ongoing efforts to integrate literature in the burgeoning interdisciplinary field of neuroaesthetics. This is done by exploring neuroaesthetics as an alternative means of resignifying meaning in literary discourses, using Grace Nichols' Picasso, I Want My Face Back, Kwame Dawes' Dopey Conqueror, and Muazumi Wada's State of the Ends. The objective of this research, therefore, is to demonstrate that. Can you move to the? Okay. Okay. All right. To demonstrate that there are known humanistic platforms upon which art can be studied and understood, to illustrate that poetic texts can be used to unveil aesthetic impulses inherent in the brain body, to show that the conditions of marginal bodies such as Caribbean diaspora and African can be appropriated in and understood through approaches of neuroaesthetics, to explore ways through which neuroaesthetics provides a workable means of understanding how a text can be activated of the reader. So the text itself stands as the aesthetic space. The space in itself pregnable with series of meaning, depending on the capacity of the reader to step into that text to bring out meaning. So we're going to foreground how literary Darwinism and reader response open up the theoretical gateway for exploring, the neuroaesthetics as a model of meaning making in a text. The next slide. In the next slide, we try to look at post-structuralism and in the interdisciplinary trends in literary discourse. Now, we in the literary field are aware that the emergence of post-structuralism as our turn earlier model for meaning making. Different theories have been outturned, and then this very space has allowed the ground for, or rather, it has collapsed any center where meaning is said to reside. So by doing so, it has offered or opened up the space for this interdisciplinarity, trends in literary discourses. So of course, we have had people from the beginning. We have people like Derrida, whose deconstructions and the rest have have, have turned earlier notions of meaning, But then we are going to see how this also open up the space for us to engage in neuroaesthetics. So with the emergence of post-structuralism, or what Frederick Crew calls a militant critical avant-garde or post-structuralist vanguard, well-defined theoretical and analytical structures have incrementally given way. This loss of agency means, to a very large extent, meant to a very extent, okay, led to an explosion within traditional structures that had, for several decades, held literary discourses in one bridge. Understanding this contestation regarding meaning making and literary discourses, Levin Richards submits that one of the best things a literary critic can do today is to become interdisciplinary. So there's this advocacy now for engaging literary scholars engaging in interdisciplinary studies, because literature itself is fluid. Literature itself, literary discourses, are sparked by non-literary realities. So different fields, different models. People have gone into geography in the name of eco-criticism. People have gone into different fields. So there is this rising call for this trend to increase, and this work is part of the response. It's part of the response. So I'm arguing for the need for interdisciplinarity. Levin goes on to say that Plato's dialogue art is never treated as independent, but is always subsumed under more general considerations. Even the fashion in ontological discourses that fashion what we have today as literature or literary discourses, beginning with Plato, moving to Aristotle, Ben Jonson, all of these were engaged in non-literary discourses from philosophy, from history, are deployed into literature. Even sciences, as we'll see later, there was no such field as science in itself. Literary dictated literature rather had these conversations that gave birth to what we have today as an independent field called the sciences. So arguing for the need for interdisciplinary, Levin, as I said, goes on to say that Plato's dialogue art is never treated. So please, can you go to the next slide? Excuse me. Okay, so the whole point of Levin's argument, which is of relevant to this study, is that earlier ontological approaches to literary discourses were sparked by, situated within and sustained by other disciplines, such as philosophy, like I said, and in his words, the dominant mode of interpretation in the period preceding the new criticism was historical, which often involved one field in other fields as well. David Bell also raises the question of interdisciplinarity by arguing for the relationship between literary and scientific studies. So Bell's work analyzes ways in which the notion of simulacrum becomes significant, especially in the 60s and 70s in French philosophical literary cycles, by linking its rhythmization to scientific development. Pointedly, man as a subjective being can hardly ever be entirely studied using particular algorithm. In literary discourses, simulacrum, a model based on correlation, as the present study is set to demonstrate, can be used as a model for interpretation. So the next slide. The interlink. No, you're a bit, I am at the interlink between science and literature. The interlink between science and literature. For the purpose of time, I'm trying to skip a lot of other things I've planned. No, I am at the interlink between science and literature. The interlink, the connection, the connection. I'm trying to establish the connection between. I have argued that the post-structuralist platform has offered or opened up doors for interdisciplinarity. So now I'm trying to show that there is even a connection between science and literature. The reason I did this is to show that arguments to outturn argument, the very argument that try to exclude literature from this very discourse, because they said that they were trying to use much more scientific model to literary interpretation, and then I wonder what scientificity means in the context of what they were saying. So I'm trying to show here that there is even a connection between science from the beginning of what we call the grand narrative. So the argument that literature cannot participate in neuroaesthetic discourses is not only skewed but also misleading. This is so particularly because ontological discourses that shape up scholarship as it is today had no sharp distinction between what is considered in the present day as the science and the humanities. This is why Cartwright goes on to say that sometimes Dante's The Divine Comedy would sacrifice philosophical consistency for poetic effect. In this sense, objective reality were depicted through allegory, a symbolic extrapolation of the world of things and essence through a story or scene acted out by human, animal, or mythical characters. To strengthen his argument, it is important to turn to Yeats' The Symbolism of Poetry, where he pontificates on the interlink between science and literature with some considerable level of success. Now, turning to Yeats would have helped us if I'd had the time, because that work actually showed that even most of those that early scientists, as they were called, were not purely scientists. Most of them were artists, were also engaged in literary discourses. Some of them had difficulties explaining a phenomenon, so they were able to use literary literary text, especially poetry text, to drive out the meaning of what they are trying to explain scientifically. So there was this connection between the sciences and literature in that sense. In in consequence, literature, as it suggests, participates in scientific knowledge through symbolic representation. In the context of the present study, Yeats' notion of symbolism as the evocation of external reality is of essence. So we are trying to look at neuroaesthetics as a major platform. I think I'll take yeah. Can you move to the next slide, please? Neuroaesthetics as emerging platform for thank you. So, of course, neuroaesthetics is an offshoot of neurosciences, and neuroaesthetics itself, is a branch of cognitive science, or some will say cognitive neuroscience. So it has not only opened up several platforms for expanding the frontier of existing academic discipline, but has also provided explanatory scope for exploring them. Launched by Semez Zaki and V.S. Ramachandran, neuroaesthetic is no doubt a relatively recent but prominent platform for understanding the workings of the human mind as it relates to understanding the constitutiveness of aesthetics, essentially as a contingent product of artistic creation and tool for perceiving reality encoded within such creation. In the context of the above conception, it is clear, therefore, that neuroaesthetics is set on the assumption that cognitive aesthetics arise from the interaction of perceptual, uh, emotional, and evaluative processes with social and contextual factors. In this sense, neuroaesthetics is concerned with ways through which particular object of art, in the words of Kopchik, can be experienced when people approach them with an aesthetic orientation. I will take time to say one or two things here because we are aware of neuroaesthetics. Of course, there's a place where I try to explain the connection between aesthetics itself and neuroaesthetics. But there, I spoke about the connections and the differences. But when we say aesthetics, we know that we are talking about the notion of beauty. But how do we arrive? How do we explain the process uh, through which this notion of beauty is uncovered, is unveiled in a literary sense? And I think this is one of the very nice things that neuroaesthetics has done. That's brought that platform not only of for disciplinarity, but that through it we can actually understand the workings of what we call the aesthetic, or what they call now they call it the aesthetic impulse, the impulse that which spark the brain, the brain, they call it the brain mind, into perception, into understanding. And I said that the key to this work is to let people to provide a practical ways of understanding literary text, understanding literary text. So that the sense of aesthetics, the notion of aesthetics can be explicated through neuroaesthetics principles. And that is where the transdisciplinarity is key. The next slide, please. The next slide. In the light of the above backgrounding, Nadal and Skolf define neuroaesthetics as the study of the biological mechanism and psychological process evoked in the creator or the spectator when adopting an aesthetic orientation towards an artistic or non-artistic object in the course of interacting with it. So the notion of dance, there are certain things that spark the brain, that leads it into involuntary motion. So when you listen to music, unconsciously you begin to act to it, to react to it, because there is a sense of beauty, that the sense of appeal that moves your body. So in this definition, we see that there are biological mechanisms and psychological processes that are involved in this. And the creator, the artist himself. And that is why I rushed it because of time. Roland Barthes' notion of a death by author it's a way of eliminating the author function completely as an agency for textual interpretation. But I think the author is not completely dead, not in the sense that a reader will need to consult with the author to bring out meaning. No, it is in the sense that there is a shared experience between the creator, like this division is trying to say, and the reader. So when phenomenological approaches try to silence the author, the reader eventually becomes the author, because they argue that it is the reader that is the Is the artistic creator, the creator of a text. So if the reader becomes the creator of a text, then it means that he does so to the extent that there is a meeting point between him, the reader, or they, not to exclude the other gender, between they and the author in this shared, in which they have a shared experience locked within the text. So the reader comes into the text to unveil that, to to excavate, I think is the right word, excavate the hidden treasures dropped in the text by the author. So the author, his experience, his experiences are there, his pains, whatever it is that he experienced in the society is encapsulated within the text. The author, the reader who does not understand some of these variables cannot actually engage in this process of meaning making. So there must be a connection between the reader and the author, especially in the way in the background experiences they share, for them to understand the meaning of the text, the meaning that is locked within the text. So one of the approaches by which the biological underpinnings of aesthetic behavior have been explored as captured by Checheridge is referred to as parallelism, a term that aims to illustrate ways in which artists have devised techniques and used resources that catch the attention of spectators, interest them, and appeal to them by engaging certain neural processes related with reward and arousal. So the same thing I'm trying to say earlier. So central to neuroaesthetics, therefore, is that it offers the conceptual paradigm for explanation of biological underpinnings of what constitute aesthetic behavior, especially by exploring certain neural processes involved in the perception or realization of the artistic creation. Three key biological mechanisms by which neuroaesthetics underpin aesthetic impulse as proposed by Nadal and Scott are emotion, context, and expertise. Now, these are the three things I am trying to look at. How the emotion of the author is an emotion that is shared by a society per time. So he unlocks it within the text. He does that with the understanding that there is a shared experience because humanity, no matter their diversity, are one. So we all go through, or we accept two things. We are motivated by pleasure and we are driven away by pains. So these are the things that the author drops within the text. So the context, for one to be able to understand a text, the context within which the text is written must be understood. And if a reader does not have certain level of expertise, it will be difficult for the reader to pick out aesthetic, what they call aesthetics in the text. Is that it has. Am I still on? Are you listening to me, please? Can I get a response, please? Are you listening to me? Hello? Adil, I want to get a response. Are you with me? All right. So these are the three things that come into play. They have neuroaesthetics have provided templates that these things can be unveiled as the process of perception or understanding of a text. The next slide, please. The next slide. The next slide. Hello. Can I have the next slide? Can you move to the next slide, please? Is Adil there? Mr. Adil, are you listening to me? Something seems to be wrong here. Is Mr. Adil with me, please? Hello? 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 Is my network on or it has gone off? Adil seems not to be hearing me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. I said you should go to the next slide. I didn't see the action
Yes,
and I
sir.
was, okay, all right. Okay. So, thank you. In the context of literary neuroaesthetics, emotions play a vital role in the realization of meaning. Emotions in this context are built by mental imageries, which are themselves elicited by memories of personal and collective emotion, emotional predicates that embody aesthetic impulse, such as pleasure, appeal, beauty, and even pain located within a literary work. The next, the next biological mechanism by which neuroaesthetics deploys to underpin aesthetic behavior, as proposed by Nadal and Skov, is context. Context underscores the concern of neuroaesthetics, especially in the way in which it focuses on neural activities that explore features that influence aesthetic behavior. The third among these biological mechanisms is familiarity and expertise, a condition that enables for an effective aesthetic transaction by bringing to play existing knowledge, analytical depth, accurate self uh, monitoring, and automaticity to the interpretation of an artwork. So I've tried to explain these three variables that um, spark meaning, the perception of a literary text. Uh, the next slide. All right. So neuroaesthetics and aesthetics, a conceptual clarification. When I started the work, the questions I always meet uh, is there any significant connection between aesthetics and neuroaesthetics? So I went back to ask myself, okay, aesthetics, what is aesthetics? We all know what aesthetics, is. But sometimes we find it difficult to even explicate it, to explain it in a concrete term. So we know beauty. When they say aesthetic, we say, the sense of beauty. So I try to see, okay, is there any connection between these two? So of interest to neuroaesthetics to begin with is not essentially to demarcate the gap between neuroaesthetics and aesthetics, but to explore the extent to which science can reveal anything significant about art. So science have been accusing art people in the humanities, scholars in the humanities, literature, for example, of subjectivity. So they argue that there's no objectivity in literary discourse. But neuroaesthetics have provided a model, not scientific in the sense of going to lab, but uh, uh, objectivity that can be tested, and then which is why I am deploying literary Darwinism and reader response. In reader response, I would elicit the response of selected students uh, to text. Now to see if there is a particular thing that have been mentioned there. Is it the emotion? Do they have shared emotion with the author, or do they have understanding of the context within which the texts are set, or do they are there any familiar experiences that they share or they find in the text? So when you do that consistently, that would follow much objective, because I would not be interpreting. I would only elicit um, their responses. So a number of issues are raised about the scientific approach to art as a means of recovering aesthetic effects in literary practice. This conceptual constitution is, however, sparked by lack of clear understanding of the bridge that connects these two cultures: science on the one hand, and art, philosophy, and humanities on the other. It is important to build arguments on the two approaches where the literature is implicated as a viable field for engaging in the study of neuroaesthetics, evolutionary and embodied experience. I've explained that in some ways. The next slide. So, neuroaesthetics and literary criticism. How can we bring neuroaesthetics to literary discourse? How can we how can we bring it into this form of discourse? So, literary discourse, like I said earlier on, are influenced by discourses outside of literature. Earlier literary engagement with the field of neuroaesthetics were aimed primarily at arguing for the inclusion of literature as tool for exploring the human mind. The phenomenological approach to literary criticism provides the template from which the brain process that normally underlie the interaction of the human being with the world are reflected forcefully and in condensed manner. This new literary engagement opens up more grounds for explaining the evolutionary relevance of approaching meaning making in literary discourse using the phenomenological perspective. The next slide. Thank you. Yeah, for want of time, I wouldn't go far, but we do know that in literary criticism, I'm still referring to the previous slide, uh, the literary Darwinism. Of course, it's getting ground now. It's a new theory that is getting ground now after deconstruction and all that. It's getting ground now. It's one of the viable ways, tools by which neuroaesthetics can be engaged. And then, of course, we know of phenomenological theories like reader response and the rest that are also viable tools, like I've explained, of exploring meaning from the point of view of the reader. One of the meeting point between neuroaesthetics and psychoanalysis. This is another question I often encounter in the course of this research. They ask, what then is the difference between neuroaesthetics and psychoanalysis? What is it that psychoanalysis has not done that I am trying to bring in neuroaesthetics to do? So um, which is why I brought this to see the meeting point and then the point of divergence between these two. And then I am working on not the connections. I'm trying to use the diversions. What is it that is not in this theory, psychoanalysis, that is here, that is of importance to the study. So one of the meeting points between the neuroaesthetics and psychoanalysis is the concern with the concept of drive, which is defined as a source of endogenous stimulus involving the mind in relation to the intrinsic connection between the body and the mind. Despite the seemingly common ground shared by these fields of endeavor, namely the concern with the mind, there are markedly differences between neuroaesthetics and psychoanalysis in a number of ways. Okay. Psychoanalysis, when they talk about the unconscious in psychoanalysis, it is not in a way to underpin the working of the mind, because it is in the absence. The unconscious works in the absence because it operates irrespective of whether the person is involved, is aware of it or not. These are drives that lead to particular action that are not present to the person performing such action. In neuroaesthetics, we want to see that certain things influence the mind in interpretation of text. There are things that are not necessarily, do not necessarily control the person in itself, but that possessing it enables the perception of the world outside. Now, in Freud's notion of the unconscious, you go to Carl Jung's, you go to and all those proponents. They talk about the danger of this unconscious, how it leads us to certain actions that we do not actually know. Of course, Freud talks about the connection between the mother and the child, and how that leads to hatred for the father figure, that contestation for space. So here they are talking about the perception of the world around us. So neuroaesthetics help us to perceive the world. If we have this tool readily, which is why this research is important. If we have these tools, teaching our students literary texts, and by extension, understanding of the world around them will be much more easier. And the recent works that are going on in neuroaesthetics is even to bring the connection between neuroaesthetics and medical practice. How even in medicine, the text could be used to bring out the experiences of the patient. I think somebody is working on that field. But here I'm concerned with the perception of the literary text, how that can advance literary discourse. So despite the seemingly, okay, another area of marked difference between neuroaesthetics and psychoanalysis is the focus on human experience, which resulted in the scant attention of neuroscientists to psychoanalysis interest on emotion and consciousness. So one is emotion, the other is consciousness. Both fields also work on different conceptual positions that create a mutual mistrust among them. We can also turn to Pavlov's notion of conditioning and Freud's conception of the unconscious to further understand the point of convergence between these fields. I will not go into detail because of time. The next slide. Okay, so one of the connecting points between neuroscience and psychoanalysis, as Costa and Caltugueron point, derives from research on the mechanism underpinning the regulation of affective behavior. Okay, the emergence of neuropsychoanalysis has further created some meeting point between neuroaesthetics and psychoanalysis. The work by Anderson and Green titled Suppressing Unwanted Memories by Executive Controls provides yet another elucidating contribution to the convergence between psychoanalysis and neuroscience. Now, um, um, the way in which the text makes sense to us, the way in which the text makes meaning to us, is key to the study. Uh, the experiences. Do we bring our experience into the text? Is that connection? Are this unconscious? Now, I would like also to have more light from audience in the second part of it on this very argument, especially the connection between psychoanalysis and the neurosciences. And then, of course, the divergence and how we can draw a fine parallel between the two. So I went into empirical perspective on some work on neuroscience. I think it is the last part of our discussion. I went into okay, what works have been done. So recent literatures have shown that scholars are beginning to turn their attentions to interdisciplinary discourses. Neuroscience, neuroaesthetics is one of the new areas that offers conceptual and epistemic ground for engaging in such discourses. In his thesis, Nervous Aesthetics, Cognitive Science, Literary Criticism, and the Modern Novel, Bartlett, Michael James, set out to explore the potentials to connect the discipline of literary criticism with the technique, insights, and theories of cognitive sciences. Chow Wai-Young, uh, Philosophy of Culture, Neuroscience, further engages with interdisciplinary studies by examining the nexus between culture and neuroscience. In fact, there is the uh, uh, um, cultural neurosciences that shows how even culture is defined by the mind. Like what we have as culture is defined by the mind. And for the reader to be able to perceive, to understand a text, the reader must understand the mind that shaped the culture that they are reading. So by so doing, perception becomes easier. The aesthetic impulse is sparked much more easier with that understanding. And um, Elise Chacon provides yet another cerebral perspective on the brain cell as an aesthetic object. Now, that study goes on to show how the brain responds. Uh, that's the brain responds to culture. The brain responds to certain things if it does not exist in one's culture. The brain cannot relate with it. Whatever does not exist in in the mind that shapes the culture, the mind finds it difficult to interpret, to connect with it. And there's this argument also about uh, um, experience. The, uh, this what they call relativism. Relativism. What does not what you can be you some cultures are blind to certain cultures because their mind did not deal with it. So it's not enshrined the culture to have particular colors. So if there's no such word as red, it's difficult for one to understand red. So if a text talks about snow, for example, and the culture from which the reader is does not know what snow is, it becomes difficult for the reader to understand the mind to engage with what snow looks like. So, and when that occurs, it becomes difficult for interpretation, the process of discourse. So Barry and Patrick Barry and Patrick's work is yet another contribution to interdisciplinary discourse offered by neuroscience is under the heading forgetting the Madeleine, Proud, and neurosciences. So all the scholars engage in. I'm so sorry. I'm not using my laptop. It's a phone, and it's falling. So several of them work. Now, why I brought all this is to show that what I am doing will be far different from what these scholars have done. So let's look at the next slides. Works on the viability of evolutionary theory to literature. Am I okay? Okay, yes. Viability of evolutionary theory. How viable is this theory? Can this theory work in the interpretation of text using neuroaesthetics? So in useful fictions, evolution, anxiety, and the origin of literature, Austin Michael recognizes the sluggish disposition with which scholars in the humanities have embraced evolutionary synthesis, which offers a very promising analytical platform for answering some of our deepest questions. Why do we respond to beauty? Why do we enjoy fictional narratives? In his defense for the viability of Darwinian approach to literary discourse, Michael argues that fictional works for which literature has produced over time have helped in preserving and conveying information. So that is one of the ways literature has helped in the theory of evolution in terms of preserving information. So the text itself serves as an archive that, for example, we could read Homer, we can engage with such text, and we could go back to time and then understand the mind of those people at that time and see how it has shaped our own mind, and then how it can help in the interpretation of the text. So for that is one viable thing that literature has done, that it can be seen as a viable means of studying literature. So Michael goes on to describe fiction as a cognitive workout. So the brain is engaged in the construction of a text, of literary works. So the mind, in the sense of neurosciences, the way it works, comes to play in the fashioning of a text. In the meta mind, how sexual choice shaped the evolution of human nature, Geoffrey Miller argues that sexual selection had a larger role in the development of human culture than what is commonly assumed. All right, the last part. I think I'm concluding now. The conclusion. The conclusion. All right, so I said earlier that this discourse is to bring out our mind to seeing that neuroaesthetics can be deployed as viable means of exploring meaning in literary discourse, and the need to engage literary discourse through this platform is important because most of our learners we have struggle with the interpretation of text, And then, because of that, they do not know where empathy sits. What neurosciences does through the lenses of neuroaesthetics is to show us empathy. Empathy. When we share the emotions, for example, of a reader, we are empathizing with the reader. And if this form of emotion gets into our lens, they would easily, much more easily, empathize with people around them, with the society around them, even in leadership. They would easily relate the sufferings of people in a vicarious manner. So the sense uh, uh, of pains. So aesthetics, somebody argues that aesthetics does not only talk about the beauty, but even the pain, the feeling that brings pains. So these are encoded in literary text. So, like I said, in somewhere also, the text I'm using, most of we have the Caribbean, we have the diaspora, the Caribbean diaspora, we have the African diaspora, and we have the Africans. And what do they experience? So this form of textual exploration would bring us closer to the experiences of others. Thank you very much for your time.
Sir, it was really wonderful presentation. It was very comprehensive. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes.
Sir. So now, guys, if you have any questions regarding this topic, you may ask from our speaker. Write your question in chat box.
All right. Am I permitted to talk now? Can I respond to the question
Yes, sir.
from
Now, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hassan? Thank you very much for first being part of this discussion and then for asking this intelligent question. You ask, do readers all respond neuroaesthetically to literary works in the same way? Now, that is why the study is deploying reader response as one of the ways of unveiling the way readers respond to text. So, by so doing, uh, I aggregate the responses of various readers to see what are the variables that spark the brain to the interpretation of, of text. Now, they cannot respond the same way because they do not have the same experiences. They do not have the same. Um, they do not share the same context with the reader. Sorry, with the author of the text, and they might not have the same skill, the same expertise provided by neurosciences in unveiling meaning of a text. So it will be difficult for readers to respond the same way because of these three variables. I don't know if I've responded to your answers. But I do also know that if they have shared culture, uh, they will sympathize with people. And yeah, religion is one of the things that also help in perception of text. If you do not share the same religion, somebody might try to be objective in the way the writer may try to be objective in the way he projects realities, and you may be offended by it because it did not meet with the response the culture that your brain has accepted. So these are the things. The next stage of the presentation, if I have the opportunity, would be looking at. We'll bring analysis of these things, and then we'll draw our conclusion to this very answer. Thank you very much.
Sir, do I have permission to share these slides with the audience?
Very well.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Very well.
So, guys, if
Very
you
well.
need these slides, you can email us. We will send you these slides on your email. After some time, I'm going to share with you our email address, and you people can email us. We will send you.
All right. A very good question, Jacob, Mr. Jacob. You said, based from your study, Mr. Aule, can it be assumed, inferred, that the author's intention when writing a certain literary piece cannot be absolutely absorbed, perceived by his intended reader? Thank you. All right. A very good question there. Um, if you read intentional fallacy, it says that the intention of the author is not always recoverable within the text. Sometimes the intention to mean something might be misunderstood by the reader. So, uh, if he has certain audience and literary text, okay, they are of course intentional practice. They carry the intention of the author, but how the concern here is how can the reader absorb, like you said, or perceive the intention? Because sometimes the author might not be saying exactly what he means, or by virtue of language, what he meant to say might not actually be said in such way. So when you go into pragmatic analysis of text and so many other form of study, even deconstruction, even new historicism, for example, with the history captured in a text, sometimes are contested. It is because of this that we have this theory, new historicism, coming up, because they argue that history uh, is subjective, you know. So they even see history as fiction. So the work of the intention are not always what is being presented. Now, expertise. Now that's where neuro talks about expertise. If you have the understanding of literary tools like new historicism, for example, and you go into the text that capture historical realities, you might be able to question. You might be able to see certain historical realities that are not actually captured for for some good purposes. Sometimes they are done to subvert existing history. Sometimes they are done from the perspective of the strong. Sometimes they are done to exclude others. So when you go in, this expertise help you to begin to unveil what perspective an author intended to capture in the text. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Hussein. You said how unconscious emotions of the past will be achieved in contemporary literature. Unconscious emotions of the past. The text itself, like we said, like an author spoke about um, the evolutionary function of literary text, that literature participates in Darwinism because it carries information. It keeps information within the text that would have died off. So it helps in sustaining the existence of a text, the survival. So is how unconscious emotions of the past. Sometimes when you write, if you are involved in creative writing, for example, some of us are, you you discover that some of your emotions come into the text even without you knowing. Your experiences, uh, you put them in certain characters. They carry your burdens, and that is why the text encourages what they call the vicarious experience. The vicarious experience, that emotions, that emotion unveil the unconscious of the reader. The reader who has the same experience, who does not even know that that experience still remains on his mind, the brain, begins to see them unfold in the characters, and it brings back that emotions, and that spark the interpretation of text. So if that reader is to interpret that text, that unconscious emotion that the author brought into the text, when it meets the unconscious emotion of the reader, it sparks meaning, it sparks perception, and it's easier for the reader to begin to relate with what the other question said, the intention of the reader. Sometimes they are not even clearly known by the author that this is where they even got it from. And that is why Roland Barthes' argument about death of the author actually comes to bear, because he said sometimes we do not even know, just to paraphrase it, that we are actually capturing certain emotions. So the emotion is not ours, it's not that of the author at that point. It comes. That's why in creative writing, you discover that when you get to a point where the writing process itself takes its own life, you cannot have control over the writing again, because so many things are coming into play, rushing like a surge, and then you begin to find them fit into one place to another, until they form the whole called the text. I hope I thought how I thought Hussein.
Guys, I'm going to share the link, feedback form link. Please fill out this form. If you do not fill out this form, you will not get the certificate. So please fill out this form. And dear participants, if any of you want to be a speaker in our next webinar, so please let us know in our feedback form.
Uh, uh, as I wait for question, let me add also that contemporary, the unconscious emotion of the past, like I said, it can be brought in. Now, in the contemporary sense, contemporarity is not a word that can be pinned down um, in one breath, because contemporary must be put in a context. So, a text that was written, why do we read Shakespeare? What is the contemporary value of Shakespeare that we still read Shakespeare? It is because experience of humanity has not changed considerably. Man has not stopped killing man. Man has not stopped being ambitious, as we saw in Macbeth. Man has not stopped, being jealous, in Hamlet. these emotions are human emotions, and they are not time bound. Humans are humans. So this text still still retain their relevance, or what we call the Darwinian effect, because they carry uh, uh, the human experience, the human experience that continues from generation to generation.
So should we move to another question?
Yes, yes, yes. So, Edmond, Edmond, Evia, how can we use neuroaesthetics if the reader's experience is opposing into yours? If the reader's experience is opposing into yours, isn't it produces a stigma between you and the reader? Um, Very good question. A very good question. But here, the reader is the one doing the recovering of the meaning. The reader, but I think you are talking about the author. The when the author's experience opposes yours. I think that is what you might be trying to say. Uh, that is what I have said earlier. That when religion is one of the basic aesthetic impulse that is captured within the text. If your religion permits you to say to a particular extent what you consider to be reality, and as far as you can see, some of these experiences are not brutish. Some of these experiences that somebody might be trying to capture as barbaric or as mundane are not really perceived like that. The aesthetic impulse of this person's religion accept that this thing is right. So that brings a counter reading of a text, a misrepresentation of a text in terms of discourse. When you begin to bring out the meaning of a text, you are not going to interpret the text based on the intention of of the author. For example, what he is trying to or she is trying to say might oppose what your notion of meaning, because of your religion, because of your culture, because of society, because of the environment you grow in. Now, these are some of the variables that spark as aesthetic impulses that leads to interpretation of a text in literary discourses. So that's why we have counter positionings. Somebody sees this as right, another person sees this as wrong, and then different theoretical platforms. You can use deconstruction to say, no, this is not correct. You can use a new historicism to say, no, this feminists come into the text to say, no, this projection is not right because it does not favor women. Gender discourses have expanded. So some people don't even allow gay text to even enter into their nations, even though some accept it, some will not accept it because they do not, they have, like you said, opposing poles. So interpretation of text becomes engaging in this sense, not 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 counterproductive, but engaging, because it gives the space for different people to come in with captured within the same text, and then discourse, explodes within the text. And it is when the text spark this type of an argument that it gets its own life. And that's why in phenomenological discourses, they argue that it is the reader that brings out the text. So text is brought from the context of the reader and not what the author has captured. So interpretation is the interpretation of the writer's experience. Thank you. Bryce Magwell, to put it in simple context, how will you differentiate the concept of neuroaesthetics to psychoanalysis in literary discourse? Okay, I think that was the idea I was you say in a simple context. Okay, yeah, both deals with the mind. One deals with the mind that does not know that something sits in deep. That is the unconscious. Sits in deep that controls his or her actions. The uh, the action to love, the action to hate, sits in by experiences that we have that we do not know that these are the things that control the way in which we hate or the way in which we love. And I think that is one of the things psychoanalysis has try to do to unveil these unconscious drives. Why do people act in certain ways? Neuroaesthetics tries to recover the connection between what lies in the text in aesthetic sense, what the notion of beauty is in the text, and this sense of beauty they try to show that has a connection between what we perceive as beauty. Sometimes we do not even know that these are the things uh, that are contributing. But then this university provides the template, the tools for upon which we can see that okay, you when you have certain uh, um, connection, emotional connection between the reader, sorry, between the author and you, it helps you in perception, in the process of perception, in the process of understanding. Now, while psychoanalysis could be therapeutic in nature, uh, neuroaesthetics is shows us, for example, why we share empathy with people. Um, the text itself, uh, these are the things that lie within the text that help us to do this. Why the other one is in the unconscious, this one help us to see them. So when you go into the text, you pick a character and you read the mind of that character in the text. So you begin to unveil why this character behaves in certain way using psychoanalysis. In neuroaesthetics, you just see why you perceive the text, why you perceive the text as a person, as a reader. I think that is just what I'm trying to do in this work. Thank you. It's a very good question. And I'll expand on that more in my work, I think. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, sir. This is the last question,
All
and
right,
then we
okay.
will end this session. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
it's okay. All right, thank you very much. All right. What are the underlying reasons for studying the neural underpinning of literary aesthetics? What are the underlying reasons? Okay, uh, very, very good questions because uh, it gives direction to why you are doing what you're doing. Why do you try to bring out these uh, underpinnings? Where now empathy, empathy is one of the emotions that is lacking in humanity in an incremental level. Which Aristotle tried to talk about. He tried to talk about purgation. He tried to talk about catharsis. That is what makes you bring out your emotions. That you read a text and you share an emotion that will lead you to outburst sometimes, and then you see great men have come down. Now, experiences in real life could show you that textual portraiture of people who descend from heights. They also work hard to who like okay, if I use things fall apart, you will understand. Achebe things fall apart. A man who took his society to the height and then hung himself and died. So that the experience of the character help us to begin to rethink about what we do as people, in the way in which we relate with others, in the way in which we we advance society, in the way in which we hold certain ideas. So this neural path, this neural path of emotion, of context, help us to become better. In medicine, for example, recommendations can be made that a patient can be understood using this uh, neural underpinnings provided by neuroaesthetics. So you could unveil the experiences of or diagnose a patient just like a reader would diagnose a text. At the end of the day, when we read a text, we are reading the text to see how this text tells us more about us, how this text relates with us. And that is what this uh, 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 um, neuropaths try to do, to spark the brain, to bring us closer to experiences that are not just of the reader, are not just of the author, or the characters that the authors have created, with how these experiences are also ours. When we have this, it helps us to perceive text better and even to understand ourselves better and the society in which we live. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you so much for your time
Thank
and
you
for
so
this
much.
wonderful presentation. I hope audience have learned so many things from you. So guys, please let us know the if you want to be a speaker in our next webinars, please let us know in feedback form and we will contact you through your email.
Thank you very much for
So
this opportunity.
thank you, sir. Sir, now
Mm.
so we are going to end this session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Thank you.